3. Danny's week progressed and Friday soon arrived. Stress appeared in the form of final reports from the water pipelines and the progress made with realigning the pressure vessels. In addition, Marianne Pitt, their area executive, had emailed right at the end of the day with a tight deadline for them to prepare a report that would be shared at the water industry's annual conference in Reading. They would be spending a fortnight there with employees from all over the water sector, initially a national conference, and then at the international conference in London. Danny sighed. She hadn't done a great deal of action research on her section of pipeline, not enough to get meaningful results yet. Anyway, she pulled up the statistics for water quality in the last 3 months. They could not be attributed directly to the new water filtration system installed in February, but they were yielding similar results to those companies who were using the same system, Scottish Water, their Derby site, and over at Anglian Water. Stick to that, Tannis told herself, however uninspiring. It was solid, and reliable. And you'll have a week's holiday at the end of August, a good rest from all of this. She closed her eyes, which immediately caused her mind to drift back to last Saturday's walk. She had loved the farm, the landscape, the cows. And there had been Doug Price. The whole day and her visit to Clover Farm was indeed a good balm to focus on, to rid her mind of Phil Pike, who had, in all fairness, not spoken to her about the text. He hadn't spoken about anything at all, in actual fact, and that had not gone unnoticed by Scarlett, who, at the end of the day, came up to speak to her. "What's wrong, love? We're all very worried." Including Phil. Danny's wondered, dolefully. "I made a stupid mistake, but it's all over now." "Come on," Scarlett said, putting a hand on the back of her chair. "We can go to Costco on the way out to Silks." "I'll think about it," Tannis nodded. 88,888,888. Her phone rang. "You said you'd think about it?" Scarlett's voice penetrated her dark, gloomy, aura-like thoughts, and brightened. "I'm not going out tonight," Tannis replied, firmly. "But, you always come out." "Look, what is it?" Tannis looked up from her armchair, where she had flung herself the minute the door latch clicked closed behind her. "Phil. You've fallen out with Phil." "Look, Scar, leave it, will you? It's my decision to end the friendship." "End the friendship? Not going out?" She shook her head in disbelief. "Girl, get your kit on and get round here. Forget the coffee, we're doing Jedge at Bombspire. We hit the town, right? And boring old Phil won't even be coming, I reckon. Now he's all cozy in with his fiancée." "Yep." Dannis closed her eyes. "Hey, listen," Scarlett said, her voice alive, "I've just had a message from Phil. He's declining the evening. At least you can come to now." "Okay," Tannis nodded, to herself. "Bring your hiking stuff too, we're going out tomorrow." "We? Out?" Dannis asked. "Where?" "Lawrence is driving us all to Ecton in the minivan again. We're going to do the northern edge, then come down through Wetton and across to Halden." "With a hangover?" "Just don't drink too much." "So, you're coming?" "Yes," nodded Dannis. For the feeling in the pit of her stomach had changed in that moment, the fizzing of despair was replaced by a pulse of excitement. They would be going to the Royal Oak again, and that would include being in very close proximity to the dairy farm. Doug's farm. Dannis made her way to her bedroom, flopping down onto it, then gave in to a moment of weakness. Unblocking her phone, she stared at the screen, and waited. Nothing. She took a shower, packed her bag for the next day, dressed in something nightclubby, and checked again. No messages, delayed by being blocked. None. Nothing from Phil. As she brushed her hair into something resembling a style, the good-looking features of the man who had helped her injuries and mended her boot, who had laughed when she'd tripped, his ice-blue eyes, his sun-blonde hair eclipsed all thoughts of sadness. Phil hadn't called, or texted. She didn't care. 88,888,888. It had been a long walk that day. Over to Hugh Ment from Butterton via Ecton and Danny's, with a dull head and feeling worse for wear plodded behind the sprightly walkers, far too sprightly for some who had been up most of the night indulging in alcohol. After a brief pause at the top of Ecton Hill, the party descended back down to Wetton. "Look," nodded Scarlett in the direction of a farm as they neared the Royal Oak. "Isn't that the clover farm where you met the dairy farmer?" Dennis looked, then shook her head. "No," she replied. "It's that one." Scarlett gave her a sly look. "He fixed my boot, I saw his stock." "His cows," Tanis corrected, hastily. "No need to deny it. I can read body language. You were really into him." Scarlett stared at Tanis when her friend didn't answer. Scarlett's mouth opened in horrified amazement. "You do like him? Is that the reason you came?" "One of them," Tanis admitted, then added, "I won't be long, I just really need to say thank you again for last time." Then left Scarlett, still open-mouthed as she walked off, raising a hand vaguely to her friend. "Go, then," shouted Scarlett, anger suddenly in her voice. "We'll see you when we see you." 88,888,888. "Hey, it's the ballerina." Doug Price was busy hosing out the chicken sheds as she came into view and said, "Hi. How are you?" "Well," nodded Tanis. "We've come out for another walk. Pretty tiring today," she huffed. "Boots were very good after your mending of one." "And you got some wool socks," he nodded approvingly. Doug stepped over to the outsized tap to which the hose was attached and twisted it off, the steady flow of water reducing suddenly as he coiled it around its stand, then rested a muddy boot on the fence, an undulating forearm over his knee. "I came to say hello," Tanis said, looking around the yard. "And to see if you needed any help." "Aye," nodded Doug. "Me farmhand's not well. Got a lot to do, as it happens." Tanis smiled. "So, where would you like me to start?" 88,888,888. As Tanis closed the door on the cow stall, looking at the huge pile of straw that now needed to be forked into the waste heap, a feeling of contentment and a job well done passed over her. Though it had smelled, it wasn't as bad as what she's imagined when Doug had explained what needed doing, and now, spreading a bed of new straw, Tanis glanced at the cows. "New bedclothes," she murmured in their direction. "Now, won't you feel cozy tonight?" "Talking to yourself is a sign of going potty," Doug said, near her ear. Tanis blushed, and turned, glancing at the cows, to whom she had been talking. "I wasn't talking to myself," Tanis replied, leaning on the pitchfork. "It's just your cows don't reply." "No," nodded Doug. "They never answer me, neither." He looked at the straw. "If you want to stop there, go and look at the new hens at the top of the field." He gestured where he had finished making the coop. Tiny heads bobbed as the hens ate their grain. They were beautiful hens. "Buff Orpingtons," Doug had said. But a sudden, intense downpour of rain cut short Tanis's fussing of them, and she strode as quickly as she could up to the farmhouse. "Want something in your tea?" Doug asked, as he looked at Tanis's drowned rat impersonation. "Got some navy rum somewhere about?" "And," he added, putting down the cup he was offering to Tanis and striding over to a corner cupboard in which laundry was being kept. He handed her a towel. "Thank you," Tanis nodded, patting her face dry and then her neck, stepping over towards the door and taking off her jacket. That hadn't helped matters, she was soaked all the way through to the skin. Lawrence would have given her an "I told you so" lecture about the virtues of wax-coated, multicellular, four-layered, wind-rain snowproof hiking coats, which would have saved her from being the sopping mess she was now. Without shame, Tanis pulled off her top layers, boots, socks and walking trousers, so she was left standing in the hall wearing her long t-shirt covering her pants and bra. She wrapped the towel round her. "They can go by the Aga," Doug said, gesturing to the rails at either side. "Be dry in no time." "Rum in the tea would be nice," Tanis replied as Doug took her clothes from her arms and hung them out, then chuckled to herself as she recalled the drinking session she and her friends had been on the night before. One couldn't hurt. "What?" Doug asked, as he watched her trying to get dry with the towel again. "Just thinking about the irony. Navy rum, but your farm's probably as far from the sea as you can get. Thanks." She walked over to Doug, collected the mug he was holding. "So, you do want some?" he asked. Dennis nodded. A generous amount went into the mug. She sipped, glorying in the bitter spirit mingling with the tannins of the tea. Just then her phone rang. Doug leaned over to the Aga and fished it out of her coat pocket, handing it to Dennis. She could hear lots of voices in the background, and said hello a few times before Dilshad's voice said, "Are you okay, Dennis?" "Yes, fine, just down at the farm and—" "Leave her, she's a big girl." Scarlett's voice in the background told Dennis that she was far from happy. "I'm just drying off, I got caught in that rain just now." "She got caught in that rain just now," Dennis heard Dilshad repeat. There was a crackle like a lot of voices all talking at once, then a beep that told her the call had ended. "No signal," Dennis sighed, putting down her phone and taking up her tea again. "That happens quite often up there," Pug said. "You can sit down if you like," he added, guiding her across to the sofa at the back of the kitchen. Unlike the rest of the furniture, it seemed almost new, although the chintz pattern was very mid-90s. Perhaps he didn't use this part of the house much. There wasn't a picture or shelf of books. "TV?" Dennis asked. "Ain't got one," Doug replied, sitting next to her, his tanned features turning into a soft grimace as he sipped his tea. "Just the radio." "Do you like Radio 4? Dennis nodded. "Good, 'cause that's the only one I can get up here." He went over to the small, old transistor radio that sat at the back of a cupboard. A blast of "sorry I haven't a clue" broke through the silence, and then the pip 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 preceding the 8 o'clock news. "So, you like walking?" Doug began. But that was the only thing Dennis remembered of their conversation. When Doug had excused himself to feed Buzz, Dennis put her tired head back on the sofa and drifted off to sleep. Doug Price smiled at Dennis, then, very gently, pulled a blanket over her. 88,888,888. It was early morning, milking time, when Dennis opened her eyes, wondering where on earth she was. "Morning, sleepyhead," Doug said, noticing that she was awake. "Just in time for the cows." "Time to do the evening milking?" Dennis asked. Doug chuckled. "That was hours ago." Dennis sat bolt upright, the blanket around her falling to the floor. The coolness of the morning made her shiver, and she remembered why she was half-dressed. "Why didn't you wake me?" Dennis asked. "You looked so peaceful." But Doug was striding over to the Aga and was retrieving her now bone-dry clothes from the racks. Modestly, Dennis took them from him, trying to shuffle into her trousers as discreetly as possible. "Well, you weren't that shy in taking them off," Doug chuckled, then added, "Would you like a shower?" Dennis nodded gratefully. When she was fully dressed, and Doug had returned from the dairy, Dennis offered to help with a pot of tea. "What is there to do on a Sunday?" she asked, looking out of the window. Soon, Dennis imagined, a congregation would assemble within its vast, thick walls. "What I do every day," Doug replied. "You could go down to the river. But it's a steep climb." "How about church?" Doug stopped suddenly at her question, turning his head slowly towards the spire of All Saints. "And you?" "Nah. Wouldn't catch me in a church. Besides, someone's got to clean out the foul, and no amount of brain will get the job done." Doug sighed, as if weighed down by something. "Me mum and dad used to go." "I can help you with the hens at least," said Dennis, enthusiastically. "Not much point you having had a shower yet, then," said Doug, evenly, his blonde hair rippling in the breeze from the window. Dennis followed Doug out of the farmhouse door. A strong breeze came from all sides, whipping at her hair and buffeting her clothes. The pale, tan-colored chickens needed combing out again and, having recorded the eggs in the egg book, an book that had been used to record eggs since, so the spidery handwriting said, 1931. "A good job, Dennis," Doug murmured, approvingly. "These beauties will make a fine breakfast, pocketing 4 eggs. You hungry?" Dennis's stomach grumbled in agreement. Eggs, bacon, sausage. Just the eggs. I don't eat meat. You don't eat meat? Doug echoed, incredulously, why ever not? Danny's talked about animal welfare, but the truth was she had never liked the feel of it in her mouth. Ah well, suit yourself. More for me. Within half an hour, toast and eggs were before her, scrambled, with tomato ketchup on offer. He slipped 2 boiled eggs into egg cups and served the toast in a toast rack. Danny's nodded at the absolute deliciousness of the food. Like the milk, there was depth, there was flavor. Yes, unpasteurized eggs posed risks, but she was prepared to risk it. Doug leaned back in his chair, a huge farmhouse, one which seemed as old as the house, and probably was, nudging Buzz, the young sheepdog, who was barking for his food, and dropped down a couple of pieces of bacon onto the floor which the little dog yipped about excitedly. It was strange how comfortable she felt with someone she had only met last week, and, as the afternoon wore on, a sad, lingering feeling bore down on her chest. She was feeling sad about leaving. And you can get home all right? Doug asked, as he dried the plates that Danny's was washing. I can walk back to Ashbourne easily enough, and there's a Sunday bus back home if I get going now. Walk? Replied Doug, dismissively. I can do better than that for you. You put the kettle on, I'll show you. And he was out of the door within seconds. Danny's perched on tiptoe, looking out of the kitchen window. 88,888,888. It was incredible. Up on the seat of the tractor, winding around the lanes of the peaks, Danny's could see so much. Ilam, Dovedale, Thorpe Cloud, all big and wide and beautiful. And all too soon they were in Ashbourne, the roads as busy as any weekday despite it being Sunday. Thank you for letting me help at your farm, Danny's said, as Doug helped her down from the tractor's cab. Was good to see you. Can I come back next weekend? The question escaped Danny's lips before she had thought it through. What? You said you wanted help. Next weekend? Doug asked. Danny's felt herself blush. But a feeling of boldness, of knowing she didn't want this to be the last time she saw Doug Price, filled her mind. I could drive up on Friday, go home Sunday. To help. Danny's nodded. I'd love to, she smiled. Doug smiled back, his cheeks dimpling. Make sure you bring old clothes, then, and your toothbrush. Then he stooped very suddenly and planted a kiss on her cheek. As the bus departed, Doug standing by the red tractor watching it go, Danny's phone vibrated. She pulled it out of her pocket and looked at it. Hope you're okay and not murdered or anything. Danny's screwed up her eyes. Scarlet. She had never gone back to them, or explained where she was. Was safe. Was at the farm with Doug. On way home. Danny's read over her reply. It would do. It was functional. No apologies, or emotion. Danny's sent the message, then looked out of the window, her mind filling with chickens and cows, and her hand drifted up to her cheek and his kiss. 88,888,888. That week, more reports had been requested, this time details of the pressure readings over in Cheddle and towards Bidalf. They had been low, Danny's knew, and that was a sign there may be a leak. An emergency leak needing mending would put a hole in her budget. But there wasn't much she could do about it. As she picked her head up off the desk, she noticed Phil leave Marianne's office, sheaf of papers in hand. Preparations for the conference, no doubt, and she dipped her head as he passed by her desk, and, as Danny's was trying to think of her very best rebuttal, she needn't have worried. He passed by saying nothing. It would soon be Friday, Danny's told herself as a hot ball of regret and embarrassment lodged itself in the pit of her stomach. She could drive herself up to Ashbourne and then up into the Dales, to Halden, to Clover Farm. Even the fresh breeze that she knew would get her on every side, as she imagined standing in the yard by the washing line, as the hens milled about and Buzz, Doug's undersized sheepdog, buzzed and yipped in happiness. She had to talk to Scarlett. She had to say something about leaving them in the pub and not going back home with them. But the words, no matter how she put them together, sounded ridiculous. Besides, what business was it if Scars, really, if she decided to spend the night at Clover Farm, with Doug. She was going to do it anyway. It was the fact. Tanis concluded that her friend would offer sensible advice. Tanis hardly knew Doug, the place was isolated. And, if she told Scarlett about what had happened with Phil, how she would judge Tanis's motives. She would tell her, Tanis told herself, when she got back from the weekend, before they all went away to reading. Plus, she suspected Scarlett wasn't too happy about something. It wasn't like her friend to shout at her like that. 88,888,888. I don't rightly know her. Cheryl Palmer texted back, baby on one shoulder. Phob und be are there. Hang on, she said, and, there, yes. To presumably her baby daughter. Kimberly Pitt, you say? Yes, replied Tanis, her heart hammering in her chest. She shouldn't have called Cheryl to ask her about Phil's fiancée. But she knew Cheryl wouldn't mind hearing from her, plus she knew everyone in customer services. I'll have to call you back. Which she did. 10 minutes later, and Tanis explained that she was their friend Phil's fiancée. No one I know really knows her, except that she's Marianne's sister. Tanis nodded and mumbled a yes. Gemma thinks she knows her. Says she talks really loud on the phone. Right, said Tanis, vaguely. I was wondering whether you'd like to cone out for a coffee after our conference? I've got a few days off, near the end of August. No can do, then, Cheryl replied, apologetically. Ben has that week off too, and we're heading to North Wales. His family have a cottage on Anglesey. Well, I hope you have a lovely time, said Tanis. Another time? Cheryl asked. I'd love to meet up with the gang again. And so Tanis used the opportunity to talk to Scarlett about Cheryl, to open up the conversation and hope that things weren't too frosty after last time. But Tanis's assumption of her friend's mood couldn't have been more wrong. She was really pleased and explained to Tanis that she had some news about the Derby site and expansion plans. So come on, tell me, Scarlett said, her voice mischievous. What? You spent the night with a man? The farmer? I stayed at his farm, corrected Tanis, nothing untoward happened. He showed me his stock. I bet he did, you lucky thing, laughed her friend. No. His cows. It's a dairy farm. The hens. It was fascinating. And, are you going to see him again? Tanis hesitated. Yes, she was, and she was looking forward to it so very much. This weekend. To help out on the farm. Tanis couldn't help herself. She had wanted to keep that secret. Now, everyone would know, including Phil. She didn't want Phil knowing everything about her, not now that he had unceremoniously dumped her as a friend. No. Scarlett protested. It's shit-shirt night up at Feathers. You're giving up theme night? Looks like it, replied Tanis. The Prince of Wales pub in the High Street was nicknamed the Feathers from its pub sign of the white feather crest of the Prince of Wales, and also it as the first pub that the local teenagers all tried. If they got served it would only take them one drink till they were done in. Lightweight as Feathers, was their popular nickname. And its Friday night entertainment encouraged customers to wear the worst shirt that they owned. Tell me all about it, Tanis added, magnanimously. Next week, a really crappy shirt at the Feathers with you, okay, Scar? Okay. As long as we are ready for the conference, though. Agreed, said Tanis, though the conference was a very long way from her mind just then. 88,888,888. Sunday came all too quickly again. Driving her Fiat 500 around the country lanes, Tanis had thought about the journey in reverse by tractor. By car, you missed out on so much. And now, she was driving the same roads home knowing tomorrow would bring the conference down in reading and a week with her colleges. To be fair to Doug, he hadn't said anything to her about her text, nor to anyone else. Although, on the other hand, considering how much time they used to spend hanging out together, they had just suddenly stopped, and she might have thought he would have said something. Damn Phil Pike. As well as her drive home differing by transport, Tanis smiled to herself as she thought about their weekend. Doug had given up his bed for her. and by the smell of the sheets they were newly laundered, he himself choosing the new sofa to sleep on. They had spent time working on the farm and Doug had taken her down past the hens and out of the bottom gate, which sloped down towards a ridge, which he then showed her led to a steep cliff that overlooked the manifold valley and beyond, Wetton, Butterton, and Ecton. And, even though it had been a struggle, Tanis had got up at the same time as Doug to milk the cows. Sunday had been most special. Doug had allowed her to operate the milking devices and was delighted when the Guernsey girls had given over 8 gallons between them. The air had been crisp, and the sky clear when Doug had let the girls back into their field. Tanis had sat down on the old garden bench and looked up at them. There was much to see out here. The field of view was vast and confusing. Tanis was only used to seeing the constellations with a good amount of light pollution. Here, the main constellations, the Pleiades, Ursa Major, the Plough, all had extra stars surrounding them. No Orion, her favorite, that was a winter constellation. But Cassiopeia was flanked by little points of light by the W points. Jodrell Bank was not far from there. It detected radio waves from stars, but the same principle. Tanis shivered as Doug sat next to her, and she told herself that when she came back she would definitely bring warmer clothes. Here. Tanis felt a cup of tea by her fingers and she took the mug gratefully. But then Doug draped a wool blanket over her shoulder, his fingertips touching her neck ever so slightly. Even now, driving home, Tanis did not know who had kissed who. She remembered reaching up to Doug, who had taken her mug out of her fingers, remembered Doug reaching over and pulled her in, smelling of cows and tea and the pipe he smoked. And she did not push away. A part of her would have been happy to have continued, to progress, but the kiss was just that. They kissed and he held her in his arms, as she looked up into the heavens and at the stars and the thin underscore of red-yellow dawn. "Are you coming back next weekend?" Doug had asked before she had left. But she knew she couldn't. She had the conference in Reading for a fortnight. "Aye," he nodded. "But I can come back the weekend after," she'd said. "I want to know how the girls are doing." And they had kissed again, warm and enveloping, and Tanis cursed her work schedule all the way home.